7-8 years in Bradford, and he has a master's in religion and education and contemporary society. He also studied in Syria, where alhamdulillah he learned his Arabic and more deen. So he's very widely travelled, understands the deen in a very wonderful way. But I think what really, for me, distinguishes him is as a teacher. And British teachers are the greatest teachers in the world. Let's say, we have we have a system here, alhamdulillah, which the whole world comes to learn from. We're first class. We are in education, he knows how to teach. And for me, what's really interesting is he's putting those skills and that knowledge and that expertise of teaching. How do we teach and learn the Quran as well? So he's using that knowledge to do something which is very important. And let us be honest, the Quran is suffering at the hands of Muslims. وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. The Prophet will lament, complain to Allah. People have abandoned. You'll say, no, this was revealed in Makkah. How does it apply? Of course it applies to us today. Come on, we Muslims have really abandoned the Quran, to be honest. We just don't even know what a surah is about. Any surah, small or large, we just don't have a clue. I sit with Christians, and when I sit with Christians, churchgoers, my goodness, they do know what their book is about, to be honest. They do. They can tell me stories. They can tell me about their books, because they do read it and they understand it. We Muslims read perhaps 100 times more than the Christians read. But we don't. We don't?
Understand.
That has to change now, to be honest. We live in a society, we live in a time where people want understanding. They know, they can. 70% of our children, next generation, will be graduates. Muslims will be graduates. In about 10 years' time, 70% of young Muslims will be graduates. Haven't they got brains? Are they not intelligent enough to understand the book of Allah? Which Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We made the Quran easy for understanding. Is there anybody willing to pay attention? We should be, inshallah. So, I hope we can start this kind of campaign, a revolution, inshallah, to encourage Muslims to come back to this great book. This is the book that, my other fear is, in 10 years' time, my young people will not listen to me, seriously. They won't regard me as authority, or you as an imam authority, to be honest. But one thing, when they say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul, they'll regard the Quran as authority. So we need to make sure that we get them, we get them used to, conditioned to reading the Quran in Arabic, but also always reading its meanings. And so inshallah, this is our little attempt, and I'm really happy that Hafiz Naveed is also very fond of our thematic approach. He himself is a teacher, and he knows if he didn't teach thematically at school, his children won't learn a great deal there. No? So alhamdulillah, Hafsa, we're going to leave it in your capable hands now.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm conscious of the time. I think we've only got about under an hour, inshallah. So I think I've got far too much I've got prepared, so I'm not probably going to stick to the slides. But I want to pick up on a core problem here. And many non-Muslims who engage with the Quran, one of the experiences they go away with is that it's incoherent, that it just moves from one topic to another topic to another topic, and it doesn't make any sense to them. There's no structure, there's no organization. And similarly, if you look at many Muslims, we won't say that, but practically our engagement with the Quran is very limited, and beyond a few surahs, we don't really understand the entire contents of the Quran. And that begs the question, is there structure to the Quran? Yeah? Is there such to the Quran? Or is it just a collection of amazing verses, gems, just random scattered pearls. That's what it is. It's just scattered pearls and you just pick one up. Or is there order and structure? Now if I approached you and I started saying things to you, random sentences, one here, one there, each one is a gem in its own right. Yeah, words of wisdom, but they're all just random here and there. You'd think I've gone mad. So if I just suddenly approach you and start quoting different things and say, having a conversation, but not responding to what you're expecting or what the theme is, and I just randomly just start quoting things I hear and there, and just suddenly one this item here, item there, you'd think I've gone mad. And the basis of intelligent discourse is structure. So whenever you have a conversation, whenever you write anything, whenever you communicate, there is order and there is structure. And then it begs the question that Allah, the creator of the universe, the creator of language, would He reveal a book without any structure? Yeah, would He reveal a book without any structure? And this goes back to our understanding of the text. And the way we read nowadays is quite linear. So we start with an introduction, go through our key points, build up an argument and conclusion. Okay? It's a very linear, very logical approach. But actually, if you look at classical texts, either Chinese classical texts, biblical classical texts, even Greek, all of them, they don't follow that structure. They follow something that's called a ring structure. Okay, you start off with a point, you make another point, you make another point, you make your key point, and then you parallel those points. Yeah, so like A, B, C, and D in the middle, and C, B, A. That's one basic example. And people in this field have explored all these different cultures, texts, and they found that actually that is the way the texts are structured. And when you apply that technique to the Quran, it also works as well. So this is, let me just make one thing clear. This doesn't mean that this is the only way. Just like you've got different ways of approaching Quran tafsir. Some people have approached it by looking at the legal aspects. Some people have approached looking at spiritual aspects. Some people are looking at linguistic aspects. There's different ways. So this is a technique, a way of engaging with the Quran. And it's one method. And I think, like Dr. Sa was saying, one of the greatest needs of this generation is we need some kind of structure, some kind of tools or templates that the ordinary person can access the Quran by, okay? With the translation. Not necessarily, even if they don't know Arabic, it doesn't matter, something they can access by. So I'm going to share with you some of these ideas today, inshallah. And if you've got any questions, Dr. Sa will answer them at the end. So we'll see if we've got time for questions at the end. So I'm just going to, I need a glamorous assistant to just press the button over here on the computer. Ahmed, Abdul Ahmed, there you go. Beauty hiding at the back. Right, okay, so the first question is there order and structure in the Quran? And take your experience. All of you read the Quran. You've read the Quran all your lives. If somebody said to you, okay, tell me something about the order and structure of the Quran, will you be able to say anything? What is your experience of engaging the Quran? Or is it just particular ayahs that will pop out in your mind, or particular small short surahs or passages that will come out? But nobody will ever say, okay, there's a whole structure to the Quran. Okay. So there is, what's your name? Ahmed. Go on, Ahmed, click away. So just keep going. Just go back a little bit. Go back a little bit. Go down. Okay, just go down again. Keep going. Okay. So it's the collection of gems and pearls that add beauty to rather than just individual gems and pearls. Yeah, and that's the metaphor I'm using today. That actually each ayah of the Quran is like a gem, but when there's order and structure, it adds to the beauty of the Quran as well. Okay, keep going. Okay. So I'm going to look at what do we mean by structure. How is the Quran compiled? Now, we're all aware that actually the Mus'haf we have to here today isn't the chronological order. This order was dictated by the Prophet ﷺ before he passed away. So again, that indicates there must be something special, something unique about the structure. Otherwise, we would have just had the chronological order amongst us. And then I want to look at some of the previous scholars in the past who talked about this, like Razi, Suyuti, and then also people who opposed it. And then I want to talk a little bit about Farahi, who is regarded as the founding father of coherent studies in modern times. Okay, the Christian beauty, again, on its own, it doesn't mean much, but when you put them together, it adds to the beauty. Okay, just keep going. We're gonna just quickly whiz through this. Okay, that's fine. Okay, keep going. Okay, okay. Now, most of our tafsir books are focused on either word level or sentence level. Very few look at the text level. Okay, so most of the tafsir, they talk about the individual words or individual sentence structures rather than the full textual cohesion. Very few tafsirs do that. There are bits of it. For example, Razi always talks about some connections when he his tafsir al-Kabir, but not as a systematic approach. Okay, just facts about the revelation. Keep going, keep moving. And so, as I mentioned, the compilation of the Quran, this particular order was dictated by the Prophet ﷺ in this order. So it wasn't a random order. This was something that was finalized by the Prophet ﷺ. And there's consensus on this order. Nobody is in disagreement about the order of the surahs. There's got absolute consensus on this. Okay, can you go, Ahmed? Okay. Now, when the Quran challenges the Meccans and the Quraysh and the people around, it never says bring an ayah. Yeah, it says bring a surah. Yeah? That's interesting. It says bring a surah because the surah is the whole texture, the holistic approach rather than just individual ayahs. And in that, there's a sign that actually that there is coherence because they couldn't bring that. And I'll just mention it briefly now. The Arabs were masters of poetry, and their poetry had a three-part structure. Yeah? So, for example, it would always start off with talking about ruins, remembering something that happened in those ruins, then signs of nature, and then finishing off with some lessons learnt and so on. A three-part structure. And what you'll find is in that the early Meccan surahs kind of have that same structure. Because if the Quran was challenging them in the language, it was also challenging them in their poetry as well. So produce something like this, and I'm going to show you later on. In the Quran, you've got very short surahs, then medium-sized surahs, and then you've got three-part structure surahs, and then you've got the longer surahs. And they kind of reflect the standard of that time of poetry. And the Arabs, they couldn't compete with that, so they couldn't produce a surah like it in terms of structure, not individual verses, but structure. Even individual verses, they couldn't do that either. And that's part of the inimitability and ijaz of the Quran. It's the structure of the Quran is also a miraculous aspect of the Quran. Okay, we keep going. Okay, so many people have made this charge against the Quran that is incoherent, one subject, another subject, and suddenly coming back, and so on. And you can't see any connections between what's going on first and afterwards, and so on. Okay, so Null Deck, I'm going to come back to Null Deck later on when we talk about the chronology of the Quran. I just want to give you this quote. So when people start reading the Quran, especially translation with the framework of an ordinary book in mind, they may be confused by this non-conformance and stop reading. This is the case with even Muslims, although the many would not admit it. That is one major reason why the vast majority of Muslims remain ignorant of the meaning of the Quran except for a few short surahs. And that's true. If you're honest with yourself, apart from a few surahs, we don't really know the content of the rest of the Quran. Apart from people who've studied or who go on to formal study, the ordinary person will not know any content of the Quran apart from some of the surahs that are well known. Okay? And that's a tragedy, really. The Quran was meant to be for everybody, and yet we are in a situation where you've got to be a specialist to even have a basic understanding of the Quran. So the idea behind this is providing a framework for ordinary people just to use a translation of the Quran, such as the Majestic Quran, and access the Quran and engage with it in a meaningful way and still see connections. Okay, and I'll give you one example. This is an ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 238. If you want to open it up, have a look at this ayah in the Quran. And if you look at the context of this ayah, what goes before it, what goes after it, it looks like it doesn't fit. So before we were talking about divorce laws, widows, so we're talking about family law. Okay. So Surah Baqarah 238.
Page 69.
369. Okay. And again, suddenly in the middle of all of this legal discourse, you have an ayah that talks about prayer. Yeah? And to our modern minds, there's a bit of dissonance there. That doesn't fit. So it looks like a random ayah in the middle of all this discourse here. Talking about laws, then it carries on talking about laws, and then, so what is the connection there? And actually, one of the things that the Arabs really excelled at was making certain things prominent. And this is what we call protruding verses. They just stick out. And if you're reading this, something just sticks out because but it also is part of a structure. And I'm going to just briefly show you how this ayah fits in with the wider structure of Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay, next. So we've got marriage laws, divorce laws, widows and waiting periods, and then you've got this ayah, Hafiz ala salawat wa salat al-wusta.
Hafiz, if you look at my translation, you've got those headings there of, it's the heading, the waiting period for widows and encouragement, and then the next one, what to do if divorce occurs, and then this protruding one, I've given it a special title actually.
Okay.
And if you say, never neglect your prayers under any circumstances. In fact, there's two verses together, and then it's followed by, again, further rulings on maintenance for widows and divorces.
So even it
it
stands
stands out.
That's right, it stands out.
As you said,
But the point is, it's not completely random. It's part of a wider structure. And I'm just going to illustrate the structure to you, how this fits in. And there are many, many examples, but we'll just have a look at this. Okay. So this ayah actually is part of a sequence of ayahs that start from from Laysa al-birra an tuwallu wujuhakum qibla al-mashriq wal-maghrib, and even before then, of remembering God, seek help from with remembrance of God and on prayer. So what you find is there's openings, remembering God through prayer in normal times. That's verse 177. The ruling commands to self and society, ending with remembrance of God through prayer in difficult times. Remembering God in difficult times. And then emphasis on the importance of prayer and how the entire faith is built on this pillar. Okay? So, legal laws on its own, without the basis, without this vertical connection between God, are pointless. If you're just applying empty mechanical laws without this vertical connection, the whole entire structure will collapse. Okay? And you can see a smaller version of this in Surah Al-Mu'minun. So if you just keep going, if you just Surah Al-Mu'minun, again, you start off with Salat, fi salatihim khashi'un. Okay? You start with prayer, and then there's certain rulings about turning away from charity, chastity, and then you end wamala salawatim, it ends with prayer at the end again. Okay? So you see between the laws, the prayer comes in there as well. And Surah Al-Baqarah is over a longer period, a longer section, but the structure is there. And this is, for us, is quite difficult to understand because we want everything compartmentalized. But actually, the essence of all laws is morality and your relationship with God. Yeah? And the Quran brings that back again and again to the core of the message. Otherwise, what happens is fiqh without any spirit becomes just, mechanical law and can lead to no development at all. You're not growing, you're not developing. So the whole point of these laws is to develop a greater connection with God. And see that, and again, that shows you a miraculous nature of the Quran, that no human being would present it in that manner. They would just keep the law separate and spirituality separate. But yet it's all intertwined to show you how important it is not to just to make it a totally mechanical approach. Okay. Now Surah Al-Mu'minun is very interesting as well. So if you look at Surah Al-Mu'minun, it starts off with descriptions of the believers. Then in the middle, it starts talking about, picks up the description of the believers again, and in the end, it talks about the believers again. So you can see that three-part structure. Yeah? So if you want to open Surah Al-Mu'minun, we'll spend about 5 minutes to just illustrate what I mean. Surah Al-Mu'minun, ayah number, what's your number, is it?
673.
Correct page?
673.
6, so if you look at page 673, okay, so page 673, we start off with the 7 habits of successful believers. Okay? So qualities of the believers. Now turn over, and then if you move to okay, so if you move on to so ayah number 57, ayah number 57, and again he starts talking about the quality of believers again. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِرَبِّهِمْ لَا يُشْرِكُونَ وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْتُونَ مَا آتَوْا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ وَجِلَةٌ. So ayah number 57. So again there's a section that talks about the qualities of the believers, again additional qualities of the believers. Then if you go to the end of the surah,
Page 686.
yeah, page 686, yeah. So you're going to surah, then again it finishes off with the qualities about the believers, yeah. وَمَنْ فَتَعَلَى اللَّهُ سُورَةَ أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ أَنَّمَا أَهْلَكْنَا عَبَثًا
أَفَحَسِبْتُمْ
أَنَّمَا أَهْلَكْنَاكُمْ, yeah, from there, and it talks about فَإِنَّمَا أَحْسَنَ لَا يُفْلِحُ الْكَافِرُونَ. So here you've got the opposites. You talk about the disbelievers. Yeah, finish. So sometimes the connection in the Qurans are, you don't see connectives like we use connectives. Things are juxtaposed. So you have one thing followed by another thing, but the reader has to find the connection. Yeah, the reader has to find the connection. It might be an opposite, or it might be an explanation, or it might be an example, or it might be a parallel. So if you talk about the believers, then it talks about the disbelievers. So if it's talking about heaven, it'll talk about hell, or sometimes it might give a principle, then give an example of a nation in the past. So those kind of connections are there. So that was just a quick.
If you were to, I mean,
go further back.
You just read, the first 10 verses,
yeah,
and it ends with the 7 habits of the believers. The last verse there is, such people are the true heirs. They will inherit paradise, remaining in it forever.
Right.
And then you
The
took us
section,
to
Afa.
right. Did you reckon we created you? As though that is actually completion of that,
yes, right.
and also taking it to another level, and in fact ends with that. In other words, that's that ring structure you're talking about. It's gone around, and it's come back to its.
Connects it all together.
I don't think it takes a rocket science to.
No, you don't. Anybody can do this.
But it's not a repetition of those, but it's actually ending to these 7 qualities, and
Yeah. But what's also
purpose
interesting
of
is
life.
it talks about, in the first line is about Jannah, and then it talks about discussion, conversation happening in Jannah, or happening in the next life between the believers and the disbelievers. Yeah, just in the last page, it talks about discussion about between the believers and disbelievers. We used to know certain people, and we used to make fun of them, and so on. And the disbelievers. So again, let's just call it future history. You're like looking what's happened. Allah's giving you the full version of events. So now this is a discussion happening in Jannah, which was mentioned in the opening part of the surah. So that's just a quick illustration that if you look for very simple, you look for the in the start, in the middle, and at the end. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, we'll keep moving on. Okay. So knowing the style, the format, and structure of the Quran is the key to understanding the Quran. Okay, that's really important. If you can understand how it's structured, because then it allows you to pick out which things to emphasize. Otherwise, what happens is you pick out one ayah, and somebody can come along and create a view or a belief system or a sect around the ayah or a group around the ayah, which is completely isolated. And that happens a lot. Every group that exists will pick out certain ayahs, and they will elaborate on those ayahs, put their own meanings on it. And if you look at it as the whole structure, certain ayahs emphasize. So looking at it in a holistic manner allows you to see where the emphasis is, what the meaning, the purpose of that ayah is. Then you can you can isolate what the key meanings of that surah are, rather than pick out something and say, okay, this is the most important thing, just because you've said that. Okay, let's keep going. So I'm going to kind of skip this. There are many people in the past who've talked about this. Okay, keep going. Okay, and Farahi, he did a lot of work on this. He kind of laid the foundations of the coherence of structure of the Quran. Okay, keep going. So why is it important? Can I have a quickly? So again, utilizing the structure is more than the sum of its parts. Again, if I just gave you all the bricks of Taj Mahal lying there, you need nothing. Yeah, all the bricks are there. Everything's there. But it's the structure that gives it the beauty. Okay? And again, sifting the important, you can identify what is important based upon the way it's structured and ordered, which ayahs are sticking out, the protruding verses, and which sections emphasize the beginning, the middle, and the end. Okay, keep going. Again, like I mentioned before, that the basis of every conversation is coherent discourse. Don't just talk random sentences to people. You've got a point that you're making, and it's connected. Now, the Quran is a clear book. It should be a source of unity. And yet, because we've taken this atomistic approach, you've got so many different groups, each group trying to justify what they are saying from the Quran. So the way they start is they have their own particular view, then they find verses in the Quran to support that view. What this approach suggests is actually the other way around. You look at a surah and see what is being emphasized, and you take that view rather than try to conform what is already in your mind and try to support that. Okay? And just go back 1 second. And that's why if you open a book of tafsir, you have so many views and opinions on one ayah, sometimes contradictory views, and it just confuses people. And the whole thing, Allah says, is a clear book. If it's a clear book, why should it lead to so much confusion and so many different opinions, and you don't know which one to take? There's so many. Open tafsir books and you'll see there are sometimes hundreds of opinions on one particular ayah, and you think you're none the wiser after you've read them. You don't know which one to say. Okay, what is the key message, where the emphasis is. Okay, keep going. And this approach will lead an end to sectarianism, because then you can agree what the Quran is emphasizing rather than what you're emphasizing. Okay, keep going. Okay, we'll talk about unity of the Quran. So what do we mean by coherence? What do we mean by nazm? Now, nazm means that every surah is arranged around a core theme. There's a key point, a key theme of every surah. And each surah opens the central theme, refers back to the middle, and ends with that theme as well. Okay, next one. Now, there's unity within each surah, between surah pairs and surah groups as well. Okay, so we're just going to be looking at the surah today and not the second two. Okay, so unity within each surah. Okay, next. Okay, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that actually the surah is the unit of meaning rather than just a separate collection of ayahs. But the challenge to the Quraysh was for a surah. And surah actually means literally a walled place or a walled garden, and it's enclosed. Okay, keep going. Next one. Okay. So the Quranic style. Now sometimes I'll put in the second bullet point there. The Quran draws parallels and contrasts, and it just juxtapositioned ayahs, but you have to see the connection, what the connection is. But we're in an age where everything has to be spelled out to us. Yeah? We've got to see what the connection is. We have connectives to connect all ideas. But the Quran requires you to see the connection between the different parts, but the connection is there. And I've got a quick summary of the different types of connections that you can have a look at. Sometimes you can notice. Okay, keep going. Okay, so Farahi called this the Amud of each surah. He says every surah has a central message which the rest of the surah hinges upon. And then so this is Farahi's ideas of what an Amud is, what the hinge looks like. So it's something that unifies the discourse. It's the main drift, the essential thesis, the main purpose, intent of the surah. And it's not something that's general. Yeah, it's something specific. You can't have a hinge which is so generic you could apply to any surah. It has to be something really specific and concrete for that surah. Okay? And it can't be like a universal thing that is generic, but also it should be all-encompassing of the meanings of that surah. And it's the key to understanding the surah. And what you'll find in the Majestic Quran, Dr. Saab has done this for you actually. In the opening section, he talks about the introductions talk about the key theme of each surah. Okay, keep going. Okay, so the hinge, the core principle of each surah is got to be central to the theme of the surah. It's got to be concrete, can't be generic, it's got to be distinctive. Again, not generic, and universal. Specific injunctions can't make the mood because you can apply them anywhere. And it's the reference point of that surah. Okay, so in terms of interpretation. Okay, keep going. Okay, so how do you establish that? Now, the way you do that is you look at the ayahs and you see where they're grouped together. And, mashallah, that's already been done for you. Okay, so Dr. Saab in the Majestic Quran has done the first step for you. Create sections, mark the points with thematic breaks. So what you find here is the first step towards the thematic approach where that's been done for you. Okay, so this is why, when I saw this, I said, Dr. Saab, this is such a brilliant resource to study the Quran in thematic fashion because it lends to this approach. The sections already now, what you have to do is see the connection between the sections. Yeah, but the hard work has been done for you in terms of demarcating the sections. And then look for connections between the ayahs, not surahs, sorry. Okay, keep going, next one. Okay, let's just skip that. Okay, so type of connections. Sometimes, so you'll mention something and then mention a metaphor, a similitude to go with that, exemplification. Sometimes it's a causal explanation. You mention something and then say why that happened. There's a causal connection between the ayahs. Sometimes it's a question and an answer kind of connection. Sometimes it talks about something and then the outcomes, yeah, the consequences of that. That's also a connection. Sometimes it mentions something and the objection to that thing I mentioned. Warnings. And then the outcome of the warnings, contrasting aspects, similar things that are similar, referenced origins, and things that you can add additional things that are connected to that. Okay. Now we haven't got time to do this, so normally I plan this activity where we look at Surah Muzammal and see if you can find the different sections, and then see the connections between the sections. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause there, and we're going to look at some of the short surahs of the Quran, then the three-part surahs, and then hopefully just before Isha I'll show you the structure of some of the bigger surahs. Okay, we'll just have a short pause there just to digest what's being said. If anybody's got any comments, any questions, or yes.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, brother. I just wanted to ask a question. You mentioned you quite a lot. So my question is, are we allowed to sit down and read the Quran in either individually or in a group to understand this? Because now Dr. Saab's done a fantastic job with the Quran to give it to people so they can read it on their own. But obviously there's plans to give it to non-Muslims to make a bit more understanding of it. I really want an answer to this.
That's a brilliant question, and I would ask you to consider one thing. When the Quran was revealed, it was proclaimed, and it was revealed to everybody, the literate, the illiterate, the farmers, the businessmen, the intellectuals, and they all understood. So the basic answer to your question is yes, but there are some conditions. And one of those conditions is that what you can't do is start deriving laws from the Quran. Yeah? You can't derive laws, you can't derive rulings of fiqh and so on from the Quran. That is not what is the purpose of this approach, of the thematic approach.
Yeah.
But what you can do is benefit from the moral, the stories in the Quran, see how you can change your mindset, your view of the world, yeah? Gain a deep understanding of spiritual aspects, reflect on how God interacted with people in the past. So the whole point of these stories is showing God's interaction, the divine's interaction in human affairs, and you draw inspiration from that and reflect upon your life as well. So at that level of, in terms of spiritual upliftment, inspiration, reaffirming your core moral values, yeah, that is absolutely permitted, and in fact you're encouraged to do that. Yeah. So that's just a short answer in that. But like I said, I would caution against taking this approach and then based on translation, you're deriving rulings from that, which is totally out of the.
That's
okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheikh. Can I just ask just a very quick question? It's regarding the Amud concept. It is, this element of central themes or a central idea. Is that undisputed? Does everybody agree on that? Is there a consensus on that, or is it just one person's opinion about what the central king is?
That's an interesting question. And what I would say to that is actually nobody can claim that this is absolute. Okay? There are different approaches to tafsir, and all of those were created by human beings. Every approach to tafsir was one person's or one group's inclination towards that. So, I'd go back to what I said right at the start. This is one way of approaching the Quran, and one way for people to engage with the Quran that can benefit them and they can drive meaning.
No,
But what you never see,
Yeah.
but what you can say is that nobody can say, okay, what I've discovered here is the absolute meaning of that surah. Yeah, you can't say that. And there are people, for example, who have criticized this approach, and they say it's quite arbitrary, yeah? And different people can provide different things. But what is really interesting is actually, if you have two different people looking at this, they will come up with roughly similar headings, yeah, because the structure is there. But just to kind of finish on that point, is no human being can say that this is divinely sanctioned, it's got divine authority, so therefore it's beyond dispute. But it's a framework for people to use that they can benefit from and engage with.
No, what I meant is, what I meant is, you know, amongst the scholars, is there consensus about the Amud themselves? You know,
No.
There's not, is there?
No. I mean, many scholars say there's no structure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are scholars who say it's just random. Izzuddin Abdul Salam said it's just random collection. That's why I didn't
Some
he was an
of them
objector.
criticize a lot.
Yeah. So the most dominant view has been that the Quran is just a collection of ayahs together, and nobody's really looked at the holistic approach, looking at surah as a unit of meaning, interconnected with intertextual connections. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Okay.
Sorry, just another question.
Yeah.
So I know people who speak Arabic also said, you know, there's no structure. What's your
Okay.
what's your
So-
thoughts on that going
yeah.
to Assyrian?
Yeah, but the thing about the language is the language, just knowing the language doesn't allow you to see the meanings. So that's no qualification to say, okay, there's no structure because I just because I speak Arabic. But there are scholars like I say, Razi, Suyuti, so there's big scholars who also talked about the structure of the Quran. But what happened is, you know, in our history, we had a big focus on fiqh, yeah? And everything became very bitty and atomized. We lost the overarching understanding. Yeah, we became so specialized in different aspects that we lost the holistic understanding, and that became embedded in the entire culture. And therefore, what's happening now is we're trying to regain and go back to that. Okay, right. I'm going to move on to the second. Let me just minimize that. Okay guys, you know there's probably too much to cover here, so forgive me, I'm just going to throw everything at you and then hopefully just whet your appetites. Yeah, is it? Yeah. I'm going to skip number 2 because I'm conscious of the time. Okay, so structure in early Meccan surahs, and the reason I'm doing this is because there is a way to approach. Everybody's familiar that your shorter surahs were in Makkah, then later Meccan period a bit longer, then Medina surahs are really long. So everybody's kind of familiar with that, and most people know that. So the short surahs are themed ayahs. Yeah, so those, they have a certain theme. Then you have a bi-parts. So some of the slightly longer surahs, they've got 2-part structure, and then you have a 3-part structure, which we're going to look at. So, okay. So, understanding the context is really important of the revelation, because that gives you a deep understanding of what the ayahs mean, and you can see how they were understood by the people at the time, and then if you have a clear understanding of how they were received, then you can see how they can be applied in our situation. So this again, looking in a decontextualized manner of the Quran, leads to problems where whatever your pre-existing idea is, you will read that into the Quran. Okay, so it's important to understand the connection between revelation as it was perceived by its immediate audience, the Sahaba. How did they perceive those ayahs? How did they perceive those? And then trying to extrapolate from that what it would look like in our context today. Okay. Next. So again, you just go back. So you've got the text, the author and the audience. Who's being addressed here? And that's really important. When you look at the ayah, sometimes it's not clear who the audience is, who's being addressed. Okay. And then that's the text and then the context. So it's so important to look at the context. Okay, keep going. Okay. there are clear connections between the Prophet's career as his journey and the different focus of each surah. And you can see in Makkah what the focus of the surah was, and then you can see when he moves to Medina, the focus shifts again, and there's a real clear connection between the Prophet's seerah and the content of the surahs. Okay. And yes, this is a thought I want you to think about. So by understanding each passage in the sense it had for its first hearers, we can gain a deeper appreciation of the text in our own context. Okay. So how was it understood? Now, you can tell a lot of the ayahs came because of particular contexts. And sometimes you don't need to know the specific location or specific asbab of the revelation, but you can, if you can look at the time period that the Prophet was around, you can see the flavor of those surahs. Okay? And so that's why the chronology is important. So this length of surahs helps you understand the structure of the Quran as well. So we're going to quickly, I'm not going to go too much into this about the chronology of the Quran. Keep going. So what we have here today, this chronology, is pretty much based on the Egyptian edition of 1925, which everybody has today. And that's based on the classical period. But in 1925, that's when they put it together, the tahqiq of all the versions that were available, and they put it together, and this is the format. Okay? But the thing is, there aren't any hadith or sources for every surah, every ayah. There's huge gaps in the literature, in our tradition, about when ayahs were revealed. So therefore, you've got different opinion. So then scholars have tried to find different ways of trying to find out which period each surah was revealed. And I'm going to show you very briefly some of those. Okay. Okay, keep going. Okay. So this chap here, Noldek, I mentioned earlier on, he did a study of the Quran, and he based it upon the traditional, but then he's tried to come with some criteria, looking at the contents of the surahs to work out which period they were revealed in. Okay, keep going. Okay, but there are other approaches. So Noldek looked at stylistics, the different how the style of the Quran changes in the Meccan surahs towards in the Medinan surahs. Doctrinal characteristics, looking at the belief content of the surahs. Kind of separate passages based on the seerah of the Prophet. Bell's done that most, but the most influential has been Noldek's work, and he based his on the tradition. Now it's not perfect, but it's probably the best study that we have on this today. Okay,
can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why is it that all of these researchers seems to be non-Muslim?
Okay. Because traditionally the Muslim scholars never really paid much attention to this aspect. Even today, most of the research that's been done on this. Was this research carried out but by what we call mustashriqeen? Yeah, Orientalists. Yeah? That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, but Noldek based a lot of his understanding on.
Sorry to there are a lot of Muslims scholars who also worked on this.
Yeah, but this idea started in the Western kind of circles and then it's moved on. But even today, you'll find most of the scholars that are looking at the coherence are pretty much non-Muslims looking at this area. But anyway, this was just to show you.
We find the Orientalists look at a holistic, wider approach, whereas than the Muslim ones will look at a narrow.
No.
The
opposite. Muslims also look at
I think what you have is,
tafasir.
obviously, we've got set
There are a lot of tafasir
patterns
who mention this, but
of approaching different subjects, and we've kind of stayed in that tradition. So a lot of new research, we've not gone down the road.
And I think as well as it's a hikmah, more Muslim to do research to understand what the Quran says and what Islam shows.
Absolutely.
It's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think.
But the other thing is, we judge the ideas. What they're saying, what the content. It's not about who's saying it, it's what they're saying as well. And a lot of this is based on research, is evidenced from the Quran and the Hadith as well. Okay, so I'll give you an example. So Noldek mentions this example, saying if you look at the Meccan surahs, it talks about Huris. But in Medina surahs, it's completely absent. Yet it talks the shift has moved towards addressing a more mature community, and it talks about relation between men and women. And yet in the Meccan surahs, it's pretty much about Huris. You won't find any mention of Huris in Medina surahs. Okay, so that's just one example that I've taken from Noldek. Punishment stories. You won't find any punishment stories of previous nations in the Medina surahs. most of them in Meccan surahs. Okay, next. Keep going. Look again, there's a creative null deck. It doesn't work for every single thing. Some, for example, the null deck says that the word Rahman is only used in Meccan surahs because that's what they're referred to. But actually, you can find Rahman in Medina surah. So it's not 100% accurate, but it gives you the idea of how you approach this. Okay, keep going. Next one. Okay, so the chronology of the Quran, you can't have a definitive version, but you can have kind of evidence-based, the best fit model on this. Okay, right. Keep moving. I'm just gonna quickly. Okay, so we can divide the chronology of the Quran into 4 periods: early Meccan, middle Meccan, late Meccan, and the Medinan period. And each period has a distinctive flavor to the surahs. So you can see the characteristics of very short surahs, the very short surahs, and they're just themed on one topic. Okay, and so these are kind of analysis of all the early Meccan period surahs. And the only difference is Surah Rahman 55 is regarded as Medina in the Egyptian version, but not regards as a Meccan surah. But everything else is exactly the same. Okay, I'm going to kind of skip this because it's quite too much detail in terms of the features of these short surahs. So we probably need so you've got the very short surahs, just single unit structure. Just one unit, one theme, and a couple of 4 or 5 ayahs, and that's it. And what's really interesting is that when Surah Muzammil was revealed, where the Prophet ﷺ was asked to pray all night, 1/3 of the night, 2/3 of the night. Up to that point, it was only the short surahs that were revealed. There was a very limited number of surahs that were revealed, and these surahs, were being recited, told throughout the night by the Prophet. So a very limited number of surahs were revealed up to that point. Okay, then the relative short surahs, then you've got small clusters of surahs. Surah Duha, Surah Teen, Surah Zalzala, Adiyat, Qariya, and Humaza. So this is a bit longer now. Okay, next. Okay. And then surahs organized around clusters. So you've got bi-part or 2-part structures, 2 kind of sections. And if you open surahs, you'll see very clearly. You'll see those 2-part structures, themes are there in those surahs. So a lot of this requires you to open the book and spend some time and have a look at these surahs. So what I'll do is I can circulate this. So this can help you just open up and look for those structures in the Quran, using your majestic Quran where the head is already there. Okay? And then you've got, just go back 1 second, and then you've got clusters of 4 sections that are there. So like if you look at the Fatiha, for example, it's got 3 kind of sections. So from Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, first section, then Iyaka Na'budu wa Iyaka Nasta'in, and then ending up with all the Sirat al-Lazim Ta'alif and Ghayril Maghdubi Alayhim. So 3 clear kind of distinct parts to the surahs. Okay? So Surah Muzammil, the Mudassar, you can see very clear 3-part structure. So we're going to have a quick look. So look at the Muzammil 1 to 9, 10 to 18, 19 to 20. It gives you a clear structure, and each structure section has a clear, distinct theme. Okay? And as I was saying earlier, this kind of mirrors the poetry of the Arabs at the time, which was in a 3-part structure as well. Okay, keep going. Okay, and then you've got surahs that have got refrains where the same verse is repeated again and again. Surah Rahman, Surah Mursalat, and again there I've got a 3-part structure as well. Okay, next. Then you've got longer surahs where you've got real clear symmetry in them. So if you look at Surah Zariyat, again 3 clear sections of 1 to 23, 24 to 46, and 47 to 60. Very clear 3-part structures. So all those slightly longer surahs now have a clear 3-part structure, and you can see that within those surahs. Okay, keep going, next one. And then slightly longer 3-part surahs, again same, the 3-part structure is there, but there's some overlap. Okay, it's not as distinct, but it's still there. And so now you're moving towards a ring structure, a bigger ring structure where you see the bigger surahs. Okay, keep going. Okay. Now, what you'll find is in the Meccan period, there are certain themes that come in those surahs. So signs of nature, about human dependence and gratitude, God's favors. So these are kind of common themes that come out in all the Meccan period surahs. Okay, next. Okay. Attributes of God, qualities of bad people, qualities of the good people, prophethood, humanity's forgetfulness of its debt to God, and the reason to send messengers to remind them of the duty and consequences. Okay? So these are major themes that you find in the Meccan surahs. Okay, okay. We'll skip this. Keep going. Okay, so there's an underlying narrative structure, which is the Prophet addresses his people, and this is in all the punishment stories in the Quran. Addresses people, warns of punishment rewards. God's power to resurrect the dead cannot be doubted as he gives absolution. Can they reject being brought back to life again? Contrasts with the portraits of heaven and hell. The people respond with mockery and insults. They reject revelation. They refuse to heed the warning, and it ends up in some kind of punishment. And the ruins of the past civilizations are brought as evidence of that. And you find that kind of narrative structure in all the Meccan surahs. Okay, next one, keep going. So, if you had time, we'd actually get you to look at the Zariyat, but you can do that sometime in your own time, because we're kind of short for time on that. So I'll just talk you through it very briefly. So that you've got, the first section has got 23 verses, 9 verses of rhyming oaths sworn by the force of nature, promise the truth of judgment in spite of doubts. Then another 14 verses, the double portraits of punishment and reward, and after that nature, and it closes with an oath as well, going back to the oaths again, brings it back together again. Okay. Right. So what I want to do now, I've got 5 minutes. I want to just show you the structure in the bigger surahs. Okay, some of the long surahs. So we just go to that one. Okay, so these are some of, I'm just going to, really, you're not going to take much in from this. But some of the structures of the Quran. So you've got symmetrical structures, parallelism, chiasmus, and ring structure. Okay, so just keep going. So I'll just very briefly touch upon those, and you can find them yourself. Okay, keep going. Okay. So these are some of the modern scholars who have looked into this. So the 3 symmetrical structures in the Quran. Okay, keep going. Chiasmus. Again, you find all of this in Greek, Persian, Indian, Chinese writings, as well as the medieval writings. All of this is apparent. Even the Masnavi of Jalaluddin Rumi is based on ring structure. Somebody's in a study of that, and it's based on a ring structure. Yeah. Okay, parallelism. Okay, next, keep going. Okay, so AB, and then you repeat AB again. Okay. So for example, I'll give you an example of Surah Al-Fajr. Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi'ad إرم ذات العماد التي لم يخلق مثلها في البلاد. Then وثمود الذين جابوا صاحب الواد وفرعون ذي الأوتاد الذين طغوا في البلاد. So these parallel B. Okay. So for example here, ومرحم جعلكم الليل والنهار contrast with تسكنوا فيه and فضل فيه. Night in the day, rest in the day, and rest in the night and seek His bounty in the day. Okay. Keep going. Okay. We're gonna keep going. Then the chiasmus is the opposites, where you have AB and then BA, reversal. Okay, so example, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So you can see AB, BA. These examples, some examples from the Bible, but many examples in the Quran as well. Okay, keep going. Keep going. And then the ring structure, which I talked about. So sometimes you can have A, B, C, and then reversal AB, and the meaning's in the middle, or sometimes it can be A, B, C, C, and BA. So, but the beginning and the end is framed, and the meaning is in the middle. So the core meaning is in the middle. Okay, keep going. So example of Ayatul Kursi, I think I share this with people in the camp. If you spend a bit of time, you'll see that this is completely parallel structure. So just keep going. Yeah, so if you have a bit of time, I'll look at Ayatul Kursi and see how the beginning and the end is kind of parallel, and the meaning's in the middle. Okay, the core meaning's in the middle. Okay. Surah Yusuf as well, again, complete parallel structure. Surah Yusuf as well, where you started with Yusuf's dream, and you end up with the fulfillment of the dream. Remember, we were talking about the connections? So you got connection on a wider scale now as well. You got the brothers plot against Yusuf alayhi salam, and the brothers learn the lesson at the end of the surah from that. So you can see it's a complete parallel structure. And the beauty of the parallel structure was it allowed people to memorize huge passages because they knew what was coming. Yeah, they can see the parallel structure, so it aided memory as well. Yeah. So Baqarah as well has a similar kind of structure. You can see the sections are parallel. Okay, so faith and unbelief, it ends with faith and unbelief. Allah's creation, knowledge, deliverance of the law to children of Israel, deliverance of the law to Muslims, so parallel. So it talks about the giving the law to the Jews, to the Bani Israel, and then it ends with giving the legal requirements to Muslims. So you can see the parallel between that as well. Okay, I'm going to stop there now, kind of just throwing lots of things out here. I was hoping to have 1.5 hours, we started quite late, so I do apologise for that. But hopefully what I've done is just whet your appetite to find out more. Just open the Quran and see if you can see basic connections. There is a lot more. Really, this is better than best in a workshop style where people have a chance to have a look and study. But obviously, we were short of time today, so I've just given you a taste of what this approach is. Okay. So thank you for listening. This is just a
Well, before we go, just like to say thank you very much, Hafsa, for I think just.